first. Those of you who have been in some of my classes over the last year or two know that I began writing a couple years ago already, began writing piyutim, which are Hebrew liturgical poems that it sounds esoteric, but it's like you say them on Shabbat sometimes. If you sing any songs on Shabbat, you're singing piyutim. And I've written many, and thank God my first book is has gone to print finally, long delay for various reasons. And the only reason I'm mentioning it now is that I'm expecting to get a call at some point to just run upstairs and get my hot off the press first copy. It's being done partially through the school and partially by myself. There's something else in the works that one day I'll actually sit down with Arnold, who's knows a little bit also to help, or with Emunah, just help me with the next project. But this one is very big. It's 16 piyutim along with photographs and with explanations. And then I have 32 more that I've written. Then I have another project that I see over many years, the next step. So Baruch Hashem, but this is the first step. So I'll be happy to share with you once it's.
Can I buy a book?
Sure.
I buy a book?
Absolutely.
Put me down for one.
In Hebrew or English?
It's in Hebrew. It's all in Hebrew.
Okay.
The explanations are in, I wouldn't say easy Hebrew, but they're easy to understand. The piyutim themselves, because they're based so much on different style. First, it's the Middle Ages style, and it uses psukim and sometimes just a certain word from a pasuk that means something, and all different types of other stylistic issues. But I'll probably do some kind of a book launch at some point, and we'll see. Bezrat Hashem. But the only reason I'm mentioning it is I'm going to keep my phone next to me, which I normally don't do during class, in case they call me and say they're upstairs here for me to go grab the copy. Okay, as they say, le'inyanenu, our topic. What I want to do is I'm going to start again, because it's been a couple of weeks, and my apologies for the delays and cancellations. Begin again at the beginning of Perek Kaf. We did a few psukim, and we left one question hanging, courtesy of Brownsteins and I think also Danny, that we're going to deal with briefly, and then we're going to move along in this chapter. By the way, interestingly enough, you know that I tend to be a planner, and I like looking far into the future. At the pace we're going and what we are doing and how we learn, more than likely, we will be finishing up Sefer Melachim somewhere around Tisha B'Av, which is unfortunately, very apropos, because we'll learn about it in a book, and we'll be able to celebrate with Aryeh's casserole on Tisha B'Av this year with all kinds of good things. If you know what I'm talking about, talk to Aryeh. Okay, beginning of Perek Kaf, chapter 20, Pasuk Aleph. Vayimim hahem at that time chala Chizkiyahu lamut. Chizkiyahu got sick and was dying. And again, I know this is a repeat. I'm not going to all the depth right now, just to go over some of the psukim, so we don't start in the middle of a thought. Vayavo elav Yishayahu ben Amoz hanavi. Yishayahu, son of Amoz, the prophet, came to him. Vayomer elav, and he said to him, Ko mar Hashem, this is what Hashem has said for me to tell you. Tzav leveitecha, command your household, meaning get your affairs in order. Ki metata, for you are going to die, velo tichya, and you will not live. Again, for those, there's some of you may not have been in class before for this, but it was kind of a slap in the face to Chizkiyahu, because he had not married on purpose, and therefore had no children. And therefore, when he says to command his house and leave your final wishes, it was kind of like saying, hey, you brought this partially on yourself because you never got married on purpose, because you thought that because you saw that you were never going to have a child that was going to be good, that you had the right to choose to not get married. And you're going to die in this world and won't live in the next world. It's a pretty raw, heavy nivuah. What does he do? How does he react? Pasuk bet. And he turned and faced the wall. And he davened to Hashem. And he said to Hashem, Ana Hashem, zechorna et asher hitalachti lefanecha. Please, I ask you to remember how I've walked before you. Be'emet, in truth, u'v'leivav shalem, and a pure heart, a whole heart. Tov beinecha asiti, and that which is good in your eyes I have done. Vayef Chizkiyahu b'chi gadol, and Chizkiyahu cried a great cry. Vayhi Yeshayahu lo yatsa hachatzer, Hachatzer, Hatichona. Yeshayahu had yet to leave the outer courtyard. The inner courtyard. Udvar Hashem haya elav lemor, and the word of God came to Yeshayahu once again. Shuv, go back. V'amartel Chizkiyahu negid ami. Go back to Chizkiyahu, my prophet, my leader, and say to him, Ko amar Hashem Elokei David avicha. So as the father of the God of your father David said, Shamati et tfilatecha. I have heard your tefillah. Ra'iti et dimatecha. I've seen your tears. Hineni rofelach. I am going to heal you. Bayom hashelishi, on the third day. Ta'ale Beit Hashem, and on the third day that you are after healing, you will go up to the Beit Hamikdash. In addition to that, after this pasuk, let me see. After this pasuk, we're going to stop, and I'm going to do a little recap and talk about the questions that came up. And I will add to you 15 more years into your life. And I will save you from the hand of Ashur, the king of Ashur. In this city, and I will protect this city because for my name's sake and for the name and for my servant David. Okay. So first of all, just as an aside, I want to mention something I didn't mention last time. When Hashem is telling Yeshayahu to tell Chizkiyahu, he said, tell him, I heard your tefillah and I saw your tears. Why wouldn't it be sufficient just to say, I heard your tefillah? Anyone want to take a stab at that one first? Hashem could just say, look, I heard your tefillah. Here's the deal. I'm going to heal you, and et cetera, et cetera. That's first question. We didn't discuss this last time. Anyone want to take a guess? I'll give you a hint. The hint is Ninveh. I'm sure that's very helpful. Ninveh, as in the story of Yonah. Okay, so I know that didn't help anybody. Oh, well, sorry. Okay, so the Mishnah in, if I remember correctly, Rosh Hashanah, tells us that it has a whole series of explanations of what they would do in the ancient times on a fast day. They would have actually an entire procedure they would do. In addition to the fast days that we have now, they had many, many other fast days back then, of which most of them had been gone by the wayside. And what they would do is they would take out the Aron Kodesh from the shul, put it into the street. They would put on sackcloth and ashes, and the Rav or the leader of the community would make a pronouncement. And he would say the following, something to the effect of, and I'm only paraphrasing. In the story of Nineveh, when the people did tshuva, remember, they weren't Jewish, but when they did tshuva, it doesn't say that Hashem saw the sackcloth and ashes. It says that he saw their actions. It says he saw their actions, because a person can go like this, and they could say, oh yeah, shamnu bagadnu gazalnu, and they could say, al-ched shechatanu lefenecha b'dimo. But without action to back up the actual tefillah, without something there to show that it truly has touched them to the core, then it's just, I want to say just, it's a tefillah, but it doesn't necessarily show a true desire to make change. Here Hashem is saying that I not only heard your words, but they obviously came from a good place, and they moved you and shook you to the core, to the point of tears. His tears, we talked about this, were not tears of sadness, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. It was that he felt that he had yet to accomplish his mission on this earth, that he felt he had. His tafkid was to do things, more things for Am Yisrael, which in fact he will do, we'll see that. And so that's just, I don't want to forget on that pasuk, that thought. What did come up was the topic that I guess I did not say, either I didn't say it clearly enough, or I left it hanging in the wrong way, was I made it sound like the only reason Hashem answered his prayers was because of David, what we call Zechut Avot, the merit of his fathers. And I was asked by a couple of you, well, wait a second. He says, Shamati et tfilatecha, I heard your prayers, and Ra'iti dimatecha, I saw your tears, and only then he says that I added years to your life, and because of David and all, like, and he prefaces this by saying, in pasuk Hey, before he says I heard your tears, I saw your tears and everything else, he said that you are so is the God of your father David said. So the answer, so I'm gonna give you a mashal, a parable, which I've heard many times. I think is a good mashal. I think it's good. It'll definitely, I shouldn't say definitely. I think it will help answer this general idea, which is that it's a combination of both our own sincere prayer and zechut avot, or the merit of our forefathers, that helps us in tefillah. But before I even give you the mashal, there's another issue that we can answer, or another way to answer that. Every single Shemona Esrei begins the same way. We talk about Elokeinu, Elokei Avotenu. We look at Hashem as our own personal relationship that we have with Hashem. That's first. But we also talk and we invoke the relationship that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov each had with God. Why are we doing that? That's Aleph. Bet, why don't we say Elokei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov? Why do we say Elokeinu, Elokei Avotenu, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov? It's extremely, it would seem to be extremely repetitive. You could have just, the Anshe Knesset Agdolah could have very easily just said, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avraham, Elokei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. So it's not only that we're invoking the fact that we have our own personal relationship with Hashem and that we're turning to Hashem, as does Chizkiyahu in this narrative, but it's also saying that our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, also had their own, each derech and way they connected to Hashem. We think like Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov all related to God the same way. They didn't. Absolutely, they didn't. There was obviously common denominators, but they each had a different approach. Each had a different, their lives represented different things at that point of Jewish history. But we're bringing the names in at the very beginning also to say, look, I'm about to open my mouth, right? Hashem svatay tiftach, ufi agi tilatecha. I can say the pasuk with Hashem's name. Adonai svatay tiftach, ufi agi tilatecha. Hashem, open my lips and my mouth shall declare your praise. And what do? The first thing we do is we talk about our relationship with Hashem. Then we talk about the fact that our forefathers had a relationship with Hashem. Why? Because this is where we're asking Hashem to use also our own prayer, our own relationship, and the relationship he had with our forefathers to help us with this prayer. So here's the mashal. And it's something that you can actually see happening in real life, not just a mashal. So there's a child in school, in high school. He's a little bit of a wild kid, and he gets himself in trouble. And he's new in the, he's not new in the community, but not everyone really knows who he is. Well, he's been kind of a little under the radar, but the more he's been acting up in school, the more he's being recognized and seen. The family is a very tsanua, very quiet family. They keep to themselves. And finally, the principal has had enough. That's it. This kid is going to be expelled from school. So the father comes and the mother comes to school with the child to plead their case before the principal. And the principal isn't having it. No. And the father says, look, my son has written you a letter. I want him to read it to you. And he reads the letter and it's sincere and the child is crying and he's upset. And the parents can see that the principal is starting to get maybe a little bit moved by the child's letter. He puts the paper down and the father then says to the principal, look, I didn't want to tell you this because we wanted no special treatment. But you know the Gutman wing, I'm making the name up, the Gutman wing of your school, it's my mother's father. Say, wait, what? You mean to tell me that you've been in the school all this time and you didn't tell us that your family is the one who donated all this money for the wing? Your grandfather, this boy's great-grandfather? Yeah. Oh, fine. The letter was great. He's in. Was it just the letter? It was the zechut avot. It was also the fact that there was some connection between the school and the history of the school. So too, we have this concept in davening that we have to do our own tefillah, we have to do our own hishtadlut and our own effort, but also we have to understand that it's the zechut, the zechuyot of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, Shlomo, and Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, and all of them who came before us, and your great-grandparents and your great-great-grandparents and whoever was before that also helped with our tefillah. And that's the general answer to this question of, no, it was not just his tefillah that did it for him. But it was definitely not just zechut avot that did it. It's a combination of both. And hopefully that helped to answer that point, I hope. So with that in mind, let us continue, which is where we had left off. And we're going to go to Pasuk Zayin, number 7. Vayoma Yeshayahu tells Chizkiyahu to do something that sounds very strange. Now, at no point has there been any allusion to what was the illness that he had. Could have been a fever, could have been a stomach thing, no idea. Now we're going to get an inkling. So Yeshayahu tells him, K'hu davelet te'enim. Take a cake of figs, not a fig cake, a cake, like smushed together figs. Vayikchu, and take them. Vayasimu al hashechin vayechi. Place them on the boils that are on your body, and you shall live. Okay. So first of all, what's that all about? And second of all, now we see that it was some physical ailment that was on the outside of his body. He's being told to do something that may seem, we just thought, it must have been an ancient remedy, but not necessarily. Let's take a look at Rashi on this pasuk. Just a minute, let me get it to the right slide here. Hold on. Should have it at the beginning. There we go. Not this one. Okay. Now it says Vayasimu al hashechin vayechi. Place it on the boils, and you will live. V'nes betoch nes. This was a miracle within a miracle. Share'af basar chai she'ata noten alav devela nisrach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu noten davar mechabel etoch davar shenitchabel umitrapeh. He said there's no being that would have, no human, that would have on his skin something that would be a malady and put a cake of figs onto it that wouldn't cause more problems for the skin. And yet Hashem took that which was destructive to the skin and put it and made it something that would heal him. So the antidote he gives him is strange to us, but it's not that it's strange. It was something nisi, it was something miraculous. Why didn't Hashem just tell Yeshayahu to just, wave his magic wand, so to speak, and it would just go away? Okay, there are some, I'm sure there are midrashim and others as to why dafka te'enim and why he had to put it on and all, but I didn't really look into it. So it's something, if you're interested, I'm sure you can do your own little research and find out. Now, in a very strange twist of events, Chizkiyahu is going to make one more request. Imagine for a moment, a Navi comes, I'm not taking off screen share yet on purpose. A person comes to an individual like this and says, okay, you're going to die. Then moments later he comes, and it's from God. What's happening. And then moments later he comes back and says, oh, no, you're going to live. And it's from God. And it's from God. So at that point, you should say to yourself, wow, I really dodged the bullet. I mean, this is really great. But that's not what he does. He makes a very strange request. Keep it, if you don't mind, I'm keeping it on the screen share for a minute, but look at the next pasuk. Chet. Vayomer Chizkiyahu al Yeshayahu. Chizkiyahu then said to Yeshayahu, Ma'ot, what sign can you give that God is really going to heal me? V'aliti bayom hashlishi beit Hashem, and that in fact I will go on the third day from now up to the Beit HaMikdash. Wow, really? He's been asking Yeshayahu what's going to happen with the king of Aram, what's going to happen with the son Chabiv, he went to daven to help him daven. He's one who told him he's going to die. He's one who told him he's going to Mahaot. What's the sign? So let's take a look at the next slide. Oops. Here, I want to go back to the one in a minute. I'm doing a little bit out of order on purpose. Mahaot. This is not Rashi. Sorry, this is the Dat Sofrim. Mishum shaya adayin tachat roshem dvarav harishonim shel Yeshayahu. He still was under the rubric, and his mindset was still what Yeshayahu just had told him a short time ago. We, from the last time when we talked till tonight, I mean, it's been a couple of weeks, but this was a matter of minutes from the time he was told he was going to die. He davens, he's told he's going to live. So at this moment, his mindset is still with Yeshayahu telling he's going to die. And it was very hard for him to believe that such a change would happen. This was a very important item for the people. They needed a leader. They couldn't be without a leader. However, in spite of the fact that we can give a very rational reason why he asked for a sign, it still is looked at as a small pigam or defect in Chizkiyahu's emunah in Hashem. It could also be considered a slight pigam or a defect in his belief in the nevuah, the prophecy of Hashem's prophet Yeshayahu. Okay. Now, so he has to have a sign. He has to have a sign. Now, in order for us to understand this sign and why it's where this is coming from, we're going to look at one pasuk, which is highlighted in sort of highlighted. It's in gray on the screen. Let's make it even a little bit bigger. Okay. Without going to the entire story in Sefer Yoshua, Yoshua is at a battle that needs more daylight, needs more time, more day. For anybody, I don't know if this is true anymore, but anybody who learned in Yeshivat Shalavim, as I did many years ago, this is one pasuk in Tanakh that everyone knew by heart. The second half, not the whole pasuk. I never knew the whole pasuk by heart. The second half. I'm going to read the pasuk, and the second half is what is important for us. Az yidaber Yoshua LaHashem. Then Yoshua spoke to God. B'yom tet Hashem et ha'Amori. On the day that Hashem gave over the Amori, lifnei bnei Yisrael, before the Jewish people. Vayomer le'enei Yisrael, and he said when the people saw, he said it in front of the Jews, the following statement: Shemesh b'giv'on dom, v'yareach be'emek ayalon. Let the sun stand still in Givon, and may the moon stand still in the Ayalon Valley. Why is it that people in Shalavim remembered this and were told to remember this? It's because Shalavim is in Emek Ayalon. This is exactly where the story took place. And it says, Pasuk Yigimel, Vayidom Hashemesh v'yareach amad ad yikom goy oivav. So it says that the sun stood still, the moon stood still. Okay. Leaving out the physics, leaving out the astronomy part of this whole issue, the point I want to make right now, we're going to see a similar story coming in a moment, and we're going to see how it manifests itself here in Sefer Melachim. The idea was that here Yehoshua needed something. He needed an unbelievable miracle, that he needed more daylight. I'm making up a number. He needed 5 more hours of sunshine in order to be able to vanquish the enemy. And it was granted. How did that happen? Did that not cause massive tidal waves that the earth would stop spinning, if that's what it meant? Or I'm not going to get into that at the moment. But we are going to get into what was this oath that he asked for. It's as follows. Take a look, please, now, and take it off screen share. Take a look now, please, at Pasuk Tet. I'm gonna read and translate the pasuk, and then I want you to tell me if you can guess, the word's not guess, maybe to intuit what he's asking here and why. Vayom Yeshayahu. So Yeshayahu says to Chizkiyahu, here's Zelecha Ha'ot Me'et Hashem. Here is the sign from Hashem, meaning if you listen to this and this happens, this is proof positive that Hashem is going to heal you. Ki ya'aseh Hashem et hadavar asher diber. He's going to do what he said. Halachatzel eser ma'alot, im yashuv eser ma'alot. Either the sun is going to move ahead 10 degrees or move backwards 10 degrees. What? What's he talking about? Why this? And wait, but there's more. Let's look at the next pasuk, and then we're going to go back more into this. Vayomer Chizkiyahu nakel latzel lintot eser malot. So Chizkiyahu said, it's easy for the sun to go backwards 10 degrees. No. Ki yashuv atzel. Sorry. It's easy for the sun to move ahead faster 10 degrees. No, that's not what I want. I want it to go backwards 10 degrees. Okay, so now I ask you, if you were to ask for a sign from God for something, would this be the first thing you would think of? I think not. You might think of, I'll give you an example. The Gemara talks about the issue of what's called a bat kol, a heavenly voice. The Torah tells us that lo bashamayim hi, that the Torah is not in the heavens. What does that mean? It means that if human beings, poskim, decide a halacha, even if a bat kol, a heavenly voice, comes out and says the halacha is not like that, the halacha is like that, because Hashem gave the Torah to human beings to decide what the halachot are. So there's a Gemara that discusses a very, very famous story of a particular stove, or actually an oven, I would say, of whether it was tameh or tahor. It was ritually pure or impure. And there were back and forth discussions. One was saying the halacha is like this, and one was saying halacha is like that. So one person said, if the halacha is like me, let the river run backwards. If the halacha is like me, let the walls of the Beit HaMikdash collapse. If the halacha is like me, and I forgot what the third one was. And all those things happened, meaning that they were proof that the halacha should be like this person. And the answer, the Gemara then says, in spite of that, the halacha is still like the other individual. Ki lo bashamayim. The halacha doesn't come from heaven. It comes from right here on earth. So maybe you would say, I want to see the mountain over there turn upside down. I want to see oil and water mix easily. But what's this business with the sun? Anyone want to take a wild stab at this? When you think about it, it actually is kind of logical.
He is having his life extended in a not natural means.
Right.
So he wants a sign of the same not natural means, which is messing around with time, which is messing around with the sun.
Okay.
I don't know if messing around is the right word. Adjusting, redoing.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, but that might not be a proper word.
Okay, it's fine.
He wants a parallel.
Good.
Thing.
Okay, I like that. Any other thoughts? Anybody? So I don't remember if it was in this class or the Kuzari class, but I think it was the.
It wasn't this one.
No, but the one, something a topic we learned. Maybe it was this one. We said that when the Gemara refers to a concept, someone dying, they say his sun has set.
Kuzari.
Person doesn't have a sun, S-U-N. The person could have an S-O-N. The person has their own personal S-U-N or Shemesh. So what does that mean? It's a metaphor. It means that they're passed away. That's Aleph. Bet is time, as Aryeh said, is measured by the sun. And we're going to see a little bit about that in a moment. Not the actual how it's done, but something from Tanakh, a story, a narrative that we sort of learned a little bit, only more is in a different in Divrei Yamim. But he chooses. Here, let me ask you this. You're given the choice. You can have the sun go backwards 10 degrees, or you can go forward 10 degrees. Which would you choose and why? He chooses, let it go backwards 10 degrees because it's pretty easy to make it go forward 10 degrees. I don't know why it would be easier to go 10 degrees forward than backwards, but Stam, let's just say that. What do you think? Why would you go backwards? Or what would you choose? Take into consideration what Aryeh said also.
I'd go backwards.
Okay, why?
Because then whatever is done again, I can relive and do it right the second time.
It doesn't mean that time itself is going to go backwards. It doesn't mean that you're going back in time. It means that somehow magically.
If the sun is new at noon, right?
Right.
And it goes back to 10 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Then it's got to come back to noon, which means I've got 2 hours there. Whatever I did in those 2 hours, I can do differently.
Okay, fine. But I think you're thinking too narrowly right now. Think more broadly. Why would you choose to have it go backwards 10 degrees and not forward 10 degrees. It's actually this one's pretty straightforward. Think about it. If we're talking here in a metaphorical sense, what is the metaphor?
Your death is coming sooner.
Say that again.
Your death is coming sooner if you.
No, this is,
move it.
death is coming sooner if what?
If you move it forwards by 2 hours, move this forward.
Okay, say it in a different way. Say it positively now. Look at the opposite. He chooses to go backwards. Therefore,
He lives longer.
it's this metaphor that he wants it to time, right? He wants more time, right? He moves it back as saying, show me that I have more this time. Very good. Okay, so now let's take a look at a couple of slides. Okay, let's look at this one. Now, I kind of also threw you a little red herring here, if you know the expression. I kept saying move the sun 10 degrees, move the sun 10 degrees one way. That's not what it says. Take a look at the pasuk. What does it say it's going to move?
The shade.
The shade. Now we associate the shade with the sun, correct? If you stand in a spot that's in the sun, I can tell you that in the winter, that my backyard, which has an eastern exposure, that by say 2 o'clock, most of the backyard's in the shade. In the summer, it takes almost till 4 o'clock. So I know that the movement of the sun, and but how do I know that? Because of the shade, right? So it doesn't say the sun's going to move, it says the shade. So that's going to become important. Let's take a look at this from the Dat Sofrim. Halachat Tzel. Nes miyuchad b'mino, and it's a unique miracle, shenoad li'diyat kahal Yisrael, to let people know, sheyuchlu lirot ketzad hatzel al gabei beit hamelech mishtaneh, to see how the shade on the top of the house of the king changes. Nes zeh domeh lenes shel amidat hashemesh b'givon. This concept of this kind of miracle is similar to the miracle of the sun standing still in Givon, which we looked at in Yehoshua. Kamohu, v'yachol paresh kenes mekomi bilvad. Also, similarly, it's possible to explain this nes as a very localized miracle. Lo shinui hateva b'chol makom. It's not that all the world, wherever they were standing, that suddenly the shadow moved backwards 10 degrees, but just in this spot. But what we will see soon about how the Babylonians heard about what happened, it would seem that this miracle not only took place here in Israel, but even in Bavel, in Babylonia. And it became known throughout the world that this happened as a result of Yeshayahu's prophecy. So then he says he chooses he says whether it's front or back, right? Oto yom bahir haya. That day was a clear day. Shemesh zarcha, and the sun rose. Yeshayahu etzia she'atzel hamitpashet tamid la'at. Yeshayahu had suggested that the shade that moves, that spreads out always slowly, yitpashet ata maher me'od, should spread very quickly, kilu kvar avar zman rav, as if a lot of time passed, or shiachzor achoranit, or to move backwards, kilu hashahasha mukdemet harbe yoter mimashi lemaaseh, or maybe it should go the other direction, as if was much earlier than they thought. Mipashtut hakatuv nireh shanes haya betzel v'lo b'shemesh. It seems, based just on the reading of the pasuk, that the miracle took place with shade and not the sun. V'lo haya shum shinui b'orech hayom, and there was no physical change to the actual day. But rather Hashem made it that day had either more shade or less shade. But it also seems that may not have all the need for that. Because all of nature is like one little hand on a clock for God. A slight movement of time in Hashem's time frame, so to speak, which is eternity, is meaningless. Okay, fine. But in any case, we see that there is this choice given to Chizkiyahu. He makes the choice that he wants this to be proven to him that he has more time in his life. And that's what happens. Take a look at Pasuk Yud Aleph. Vayikra Yeshayahu Hanavi El Hashem. Yeshayahu Hanavi calls out to Hashem. Vayashev et hatzel b'ma'alot asher yarda b'ma'alot Achaz achoranit eser ma'alot. And suddenly the shade moved back 10 degrees, which had gone ahead 10 degrees in the time of Achaz. Okay, what's that all about? What's that all about? So we're going to take a look. I think that was the next slide. I hope I had it set. Yeah. This is Rashi. It tells us the following. What does that mean? It went down 10 degrees in the time of Achaz. Yom Shemet Achaz, the day that Achaz died, Nitkatzer Hayom, the day got shorter. Umiher hatzel lered eser ma'alot, and it got darker, at least the shadow grew bigger, quicker, and by 10 degrees. Why? Kidei shelo yeh nispad, that people would not eulogize him. Well, he was because he was a very wicked man. And these 10 degrees or 10 hours, he refers to it as 10 hours instead of 10 degrees, came back at the time of Yeshayahu. However, so there's like a balance. However, what exactly happened, can't tell you. But what I can tell you is that Achaz actually built, historically, I can absolutely not tell you when the earliest sundials were. I know they were way before this, but Achaz had a sundial. And the concept of the movement of time, we already know from here, I'll ask you this. Okay, a good trivia question. In Torah, where's the first idea that we see of the movement of time of a year? Demarcated that it's a year long. It's early in the Torah. It's not in Parashat Bereshit.
Brit Bein Batarim.
I didn't hear you.
Brit Bein Batarim.
What was the reference to a year?
I don't know. Okay.
No. You're in the right part of the Torah. Good. It has to do with Avraham Avinu. I'll give you a hint. It's in Parshat Vayera.
When the Malachim come to Avraham and say Sarah will give birth in a year.
Beautiful. It says that the Malach says Ka'et Chaya u'Sarah ven. At this time, Sarah will have a child. What does that mean? Ka'et Chaya. So I believe it's Rashi says that they made a mark in the ground, and when the sun would come back again in its full circle, get to the point that date is a year later that she would have a child. Very good. That's 10 points extra on the final. That's great. You're really going to pass now. All right. Okay. So what do we have so far? We have a king who was a tremendous tzaddik. Now, by the way, I'm going to go back for a second before that. Something that I hope you all, because I heard from most of you independently, but some of you, I hope all of you had a good experience with Rav Barnea a couple of weeks ago. I thought that was, like I said, the tip of the iceberg of what he could have done with us on Chizkiyahu. Trust me, I've heard his stuff over. I could do 3 days straight on Chizkiyahu. But one of the things I think that he made a very strong impression about at the beginning of his presentation that I did not anywhere near make as strong a point of it, and I'm glad he did, was this sea change in Jewish history of, instead of nation, but it was now an individual, in this case, Sancherib, who was coming against the Jewish people, and the cruelty of the Assyrians. That's one thing we did not discuss. So we have a tzaddik of a king who is seemingly doing almost all the right things. He does do some things wrong. He is told by the Navi he's going to die. He davens. He is going to be healed. He asks for a sign. He has the sign come true. And Shalom Yisrael. What would you expect to happen next? Well, you would expect that now we don't have any enemies. You'd expect that maybe the next step could happen, which would be potentially Mashiach. Why would I think Mashiach? Now, I'm not prepared tonight to discuss it, but we will hopefully next week. I'm going to continue with a different line of thought. But there are opinions that are brought in the Gemara that were not for one small issue of Chizkiyahu did something wrong, and Barnea mentioned this also briefly, that he would have been Mashiach. Which obviously would have changed the course of our history. Now, so he was a great man. So what do you think should have happened now? Okay, so for just a little, it's called, I don't know the right word here, but for those of you who remember the movie Jaws, I'm sure most of you do. When they came out with the next movie, Jaws 2, this was their tagline. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. Just as a funny aside, I know Arya, you're from St. Louis, so this will you'll know this. I was with my family. My father, Alav Shalom, is from St. Louis. So when I was about whatever year the movie came out, the first time. So that summer we were in St. Louis. Yes, with all the wonderful heat and humidity. Amen. Thank you. And we were staying at I think a Radisson in Clayton. And one of the things we did was we went downstairs to the pool to go swimming. And there was a lifeguard there. And I was talking to the lifeguard. And evidently the night before he had just seen the movie Jaws. And he said, do me a favor, don't get any trouble in the water. I'm not going in after I watched the movie. I'm not going into the water. So here I'm invoking the tagline of the movie, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. Things seem to be going okay pretty swimmingly. What happened? 186,000 soldiers, poof, just died from Assyria. Sancheriv is dead. All these enemies are vanquished. Chizkiyahu is healthy again. Now let's take a look at the next pasuk. Look at pasuk Yud Bet number 12. Ba'etahi shalach berodach Bal Adan ben Bal Adan melech Bavel Sifarim uminchad Chizkiyahu. The king of Bavel, Babylonia, sent books, which really mean in this case letters, and offerings to Chizkiyahu. Why? Ki shama ki chala Chizkiyahu, because they heard that Chizkiyahu was sick. Now, these were not Refuah Shalema cards. They weren't American Greeting or any Hallmark cards. They were much greater than that, much more significant, because what is it that they heard? That it's the only time, actually I'm just going to read a Rashi to you, which I didn't put on the screen. If you have Rashi, it's Pasuk Yud Bet, Ki Shama, Ki Chala. He says in Rashi, Va'ad oto hayom, until that day, lo hayadam chole v'chaya. There wasn't such a thing as a person who got sick to that extent and lived. Ve'ech shama, and how is it that they heard? Lamad haya le'echol b'shalosh shot bayom. So he goes into this whole long thing now. I'm not going to read it, but how the idea we mentioned before, that the shade changed and he knew something was up in the world, and they traced it back to Yeshayahu, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how it goes in. But so he's not only sending like, I hope you feel better kind of, but it's also like he was mitpa'el, he was amazed by this whole thing. And I do want to say lahavdil, because it's not the same thing as Yitro, because Yitro, when he heard about the Milchemet Amalek and he heard about the Kriyat Yamsuf, he came to join the Jewish people. This isn't what Berodach is looking to do. What happens? Now, how should Yeshayahu respond to this letter? How should he respond to this overture from this king of Babylonia? Well, he doesn't respond in a great way. Vayishma Yud Gimel. Vayishma lehem Chizkiyahu. Chizkiyahu heard about them, because the messengers of the king did not go directly to the king. They went to his underlings, but he heard what happened about these messages. What does he do? Something very almost inexplicable. ויראם את כל בית נכרתו, את הכסף, ואת הזהב, ואת הבשמים, ואת שמן הטוב, ואת כל בית כליו, ואת כל אשר נמצא באוצרותיו. לא היה דבר אשר לא הרעם חזקיהו בביתו בכל ממשלתו. He kind of goes a little overboard. And he shows him basically every single utensil, every single thing of silver and gold, and all the different spices and oils and the utensils. What's he doing? Yud Bet. First, before we answer that question, we're going to look at the beginning of Pasuk Yud Bet again, where it says Ba'et Hahi, at that time, right? It tells us that Sofrim notes something interesting. And we talked about the word Balayla Hahu back in Perek Yud Tet, but now he's going to combine three things. Pasuk Yud Bet, where it said Ba'et Hahi, at that time. Shalosh Pa'amim Nizkaru Befarasha Zo Dvarim Domim. In this section, when it says Parasha, it does not mean like Parashat Shavua. In this parasha, in this section, this topic, it says 3 different times something similar. Balayla hahu, that night. Bayamim ahem, in those days. The chanan here, ba'et hahi, at that time. Mishlachet habavlim kshura b'mesharin l'mashira im Chizkiyahu. The mishlachat, the emissary, the contingent that comes from Bavel is directly connected to that which happened with Chizkiyahu. Machalat Chizkiyahu hayta kasha me'od. This illness of Chizkiyahu suffered was very strong. U'refuato ha'gemura nechsheva ledavar mafli biyoter v'rabim chashu livarcho. And his refuah was seen as something amazing, and many people wanted or needed, had a sense of wanting to give him a blessing. Kamo sheniskar b'divrei yamim bet lamed bet kaf gimel. Asarei Bavel ne'emar sham pasuk lamed aleph. In Divrei Yamim it says about this mishlachat that was sent to the king, to Chizkiyahu, she'im ba'u lidrosh hamofet asher haya ba'aretz. They came to seek out the miracle that took place in the land. Shenoda lahem alav b'derech pele. They found out about it in an amazing way. Kidei lo'oram la'karat Elokei Yisrael v'gam kinisayon leChizkiyahu. It's a double-edged sword here. The people in Bavel heard about this in order that it should prod people to know more and to think more about Hashem, non-Jews. On the other hand, it was also a form of a test for Chizkiyahu. Unfortunately, Chizkiyahu doesn't do the greatest with this particular test. Yeah, I do. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop a couple minutes early because this one is going to be too much for me to do now because it's going to lead me into 2 more topics. So let's kind of summarize like this. He does something that's rather strange. We need to understand why he does this, and unfortunately, what we need to understand is what are the hashlachot of what happens, the consequences of this. So we have to leave the number of questions. I said, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, well, nothing's happened bad yet. It will. That's why I'll wait till next week, Bezrat Hashem, because now it's kind of going to snowball and get into pretty bad shape. Okay, so Bezrat Hashem next week, we'll find out hopefully why Chizkiyahu did this. We'll also see what are the consequences of this action, what was bad about it, and how this kind of brings the next, not literal, but the next chapter of Chizkiyahu's life into focus and what's going to happen with the Jewish people at that point. So, a Shavua Tov to all. And Bezrat Hashem, we'll see you either Wednesday morning for Kuzari or Bezrat Hashem next Sunday night if all goes well. All right.
You will. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. Be well.